Hey everybody, Chief Meteorologist Hank Allen here along with Meteorologist Natalie Parsons for our first Tracking the Tropics segment here of the summer. We're going to be bringing you these weekly here on WGNO Plus, and of course our friends over in Tampa have been doing the weekly web show for the past few years, which we love to participate in as well, but we wanted to come on and give you a little bit more of a local feel on that locally here with us.
And give them a rival show.
That's
Get ready.
Right, a rival show.
Get ready, Tampa.
So watch us and don't watch them unless we're on that. No, we're just kidding. But we'll have Kerrigan in on this as well. I think maybe at times we'll be partnering with some of our other folks around the state, like in Lafayette and some of these other stations. But wanted to come on, bring you an update here. Of course, hurricane season kicked off yesterday, right? Hard to believe. Day two. Hopefully everybody's getting prepared and making those arrangements in case we get something later on. And we'll talk about those seasonal forecasts here coming up in a little bit and why they're out there. But we're starting off here with the local, sort of the look here across the Gulf on that most recent satellite that we have. That's a live look for you of our enhanced clouds. So the brighter the colors, the darker the colors indicate the thunderstorm activity, the higher the cloud tops and that sort of thing. And we've been watching really for the past few days this cluster just sort of hanging out in the middle of the Gulf.
Yeah, lingering.
Yeah, it has been. And so this is one of those situations where as we all know, if you get thunderstorms for any length of time, they're just sort of lingering over the water. They don't always turn into something, but they could, right? And so we've got this moisture plume out here. And so this is something I wanted to focus on early. And Natalie and I have talked about this off camera at times. I've even mentioned on air a couple of times. It's a little technical. We talk about the MJO phase, which is that phase that goes across the atmosphere. We end up every 30 to 45 days getting in that more favorable phase for development. And we're actually in it right now. We're coming into it over the next 5 to 6 days. And it's interesting that we're doing that at the same time we have this plume of moisture here across the northern Gulf. And we were just looking at the modeling, and some are starting to try to pick up indications of maybe, yeah, I don't want to say development, but a broad circulation, something like that we have to watch out for with some moisture towards the end of the week. And so we were looking at that sort of Thursday to Friday time frame.
Yes, you mentioned that.
Yeah, and so this is, you know, again, it's not a guarantee here, but this time of year, the modeling may be a little bit behind sometimes on this, and they're not usually picking up on the phase necessarily as well this time of year. And so all I'm saying is I don't think we're getting some sort of, you know, violent tropical system here, but I could see a broad low developing, maybe up to a depression, maybe not, maybe just some sort of broad low, but that does bring a lot of moisture up into somewhere. And the one thing the models are agreeing on, especially the European, is it would be sort of east side heavy. And so if you have the low, this broad low, let's say it sets up maybe in the northwestern Gulf, then we could be looking at a lot of that rainfall on the eastern side coming right up into the area, which, of course, we don't need. I mean, you were talking about even this weekend, some of the rainfall.
No, we've gotten so much rain, especially our Mississippi County friends. Holy moly. I mean, I can't wait for the drought monitor to be released this Thursday, because I would not be surprised if more areas, they see their drought just totally clean out, like Baton Rouge over the last week or two. So
remember a couple weeks ago we had all the red spreading up?
All the red across the South Shore area. It was unbelievable. And then it's just been a total opposite. Yeah,
total opposite. And like you said, those Mississippi, Pearl River County, Hancock, they've seen a ton of rain, ton of flooding. The river flooding we've seen over along the Hobelichito and also the Jordan River over there around Biloxi as well. And so, you know, we don't need more rain in the short term here. And my concern would be if this does start to come to fruition where we get something to at least wind up enough where you have that east side of the system being a wet side, that we could end up with some more rain up into the area, which is something we're going to have to keep an eye on. But obviously, that's not anything that's developing at the moment, but something I think to keep an eye on. And it's interesting because
nothing, according to the National Hurricane Center. They are not keeping an eye. They are saying that there's nothing over the next 7 days. But of course, we keep an eye on things, and any chance of any indication, we go sharing it with you, because that's our job. So you could, you know, keep it on your mental radar, no weather pun intended.
Put it on the radar. And again, not to call those guys out because they obviously do a great job, but they're just not really keyed in on that area at the moment, which I find interesting, to where even as some of the modeling is showing some winds gusting into the 40s and 50s, which would be at least tropical storm force gusts offshore if nothing else. And we're talking about shipping and oil platforms and that sort of thing, shipping routes. I don't know. I think it's just something to at least keep an eye on here as we go through the next couple of days.
Well, here's a question for you, because you have lived in this area significantly longer than me. So last year, it seems like the Atlantic formation was pretty heavy. Do you ever see years where it's like Gulf heavy and then vice versa?
Yeah, definitely. And that was actually, if we go back to last year's predictions, when they were talking about a higher than normal season, they were talking about more coming off of Africa, which is why I was less concerned when people would ask me, because we very rarely get, I looked it up last year even.
You preach that.
In the last 100 years, we only have like 6 storms that have come within 100 miles or 50 miles maybe of New Orleans that have developed basically east of the islands here. So, you know, everybody sees these big waves and they get all excited about that. Our business really doesn't come from there. It's in the Gulf. It's certainly in the Caribbean. We've seen several storms fire up, you know, and move north. You think back to Katrina around the Bahamas and then coming west, Andrew coming west, something like that. But most of the activity that we see, you know, is in the closer end, not in the, what they call MDR, the main development region that we see farther out in the Atlantic, which is why, especially this time of year, I tend to keep a closer eye on, like you said, the Gulf and the Caribbean. And so, you know, it's sort of the opposite this year, to where now they're, because of the big El Nino,
which you're going to talk about
in just a moment, coming up after our break here, they have actually lowered the outlook a little bit from what we've seen the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, I mean, you have the named storms. The average is going to be 14, but you have the Colorado State University saying 13, NOAA saying 8 to 14. And then in terms of hurricanes, average is 7. Colorado State University is thinking 6, and then NOAA's 3 to 6, so even lesser. And then also in terms of major hurricanes, it's going to be a category 3 and up. Average is going to be 3, and the Colorado State University saying 2, and then NOAA's saying 1 to 3. So definitely keeping the trend of below average for this season.
And not tremendously.
No.
You know, maybe a number or 2 here and there. In each category, but it is sort of along that theme of where last year, as you were talking about, so much activity out in the Atlantic there.
And it was the same pattern almost every single time.
Right. Well, and that's what happens with a lot of those too. I mean, a lot of those get to a certain point and they just start to recurve to the north. Yeah.
There goes another one. Oh,
Bermuda,
another one.
Bermuda, I think was
poor Bermuda,
getting hit several times. And so exactly to your point, that was what their forecast was indicating last year, which was why they had the higher numbers. They're indicating less of that potential this year. So I think that's why they have the lower number here theme. But also that doesn't necessarily take into account, you know, the Caribbean and the Gulf development, which I think we'll have a higher chance of simply because of that El Nino impact, a little bit less impact.
Which I can't wait for you to talk about, because we have other points that we need to go chatting about in that regard.
Yes, we do. We'll talk about, everybody's been talking about this big El Nino coming up here. It does look significant. I know a lot of people have always wondered, what exactly does that mean? So we're going to talk about that coming up in just a couple of minutes. So stay with us here on Tracking the Tropics, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. All right, thanks for sticking with us here, Tracking the Tropics. Hank Allen, Natalie Parsons back here with you, talking about the ever-mysterious El Nino, which is Spanish for the Nino. For any of those Saturday Night Live Chris Farley fans from back in the day. Yeah, I remember back in the 90s, El Nino was like, it was going to come eat your children. Like everybody was just freaking
horrified
out
of it.
About El Nino.
Totally.
Then we went to this big phase where people were like, wait a minute, it does kind of cut down on tropical development.
So maybe it's not so bad.
Right. And now as I'm seeing some of these headlines just on various media sites, of course, which we all know I hate the media, it's like now we're back to scaring people because
Super El Nino.
Yeah, it does create wild weather.
Hide your kids and hide your wives. It's scary.
I mean, it does. You know, you get very wet patterns a lot of times south. You get more, maybe more wildfires, more droughts here and there across the globe and that sort of thing. So I'm not saying that's not true, but it's funny how the mentality has changed. So basically El Nino, when we talk about here, we're talking about a switch in the pattern in the trade winds, where normally you've got that warmer water farther to the west in the Atlantic. Well, what we're going to see here this summer is that big area of warm water is farther to the east. It's right off the equatorial regions of Peru and western parts of South America. And what that does is it creates those trade winds now coming more from the west to the east. And so that creates more of that pattern here across the Atlantic that we're talking about. But you can see some of the typical patterns, especially late summer into winter for an El Nino. Wet across the south, which
we've
already been seeing.
Rain every day.
Not to say that this is directly El Nino related, but I mean, we're starting to, we're kind of starting to see that already. Maybe a little bit drier across the mid-Mississippi Valley, Ohio River Valley, that sort of thing. Warmer conditions across the northern half of the country to the northwest, so a little bit less snow up there, and then you typically get maybe a little bit colder across the northeast, so you're looking at maybe more.
This would make sense, because my family up on Long Island was complaining about how they woke up and it was like 40 degrees. And,
yeah, it's been cool up there, right?
Yeah.
And usually it's a little warmer.
Yes,
obviously.
by now.
Yeah. And so, like even my buddy in North Carolina earlier today was talking about how it's 58. I mean, I'm like, man, I want to come up and slap you because we're.
So we're seeing this.
89 over 78 with the dew point of 78 here before this rain pops up. So starting to see, I think, the early indications of that, and it's likely to expand here as we go through the next couple of months. So this is your current sea surface temperature anomaly, meaning relative to average, of course. And so you can already start to see, right there, that warm Pacific water. So it's not extreme, but you're getting...
It's hints.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you look at the rest of the map, and there's not too many areas, except maybe off the coast of Mexico, that are that pronounced of an anomaly. So it's already an indication that, right?
It's brewing.
Yeah, it is brewing. It's starting to build in. We're starting to get those impacts maybe that we're seeing already. Conversely, not super, I mean, it's warmer, a little warmer than average in the Gulf and the Caribbean. Not super, though. And then you see even off to the east in the Atlantic, you've still got some blues on there. So now obviously the Gulf will likely heat up as we go through the season, but that is the main thing. Now here's what I want you to see as we go through the next few months. And so this is you can see up there, your July, August, and September forecast from the most recent runs last week of some of the forecast modeling. And of course, that's pretty much peak hurricane season, at least August and September. And look at just the violent area of warmth here. I mean, that is crazy how significant that is. That's like peaking the scale down at the bottom there. And so I think that's a pretty clear indication of what everybody's talking about.
I think it's going to be nonstop, like formation?
Where it's just this seasonal end of summer. Now does it get that extreme? It's just a forecast, obviously. So it's no guarantee. But you can see the trend that everybody's talking about, where now you have the cooler water west. You've got this huge El Nino off the coast of South America across a good portion of the Pacific.
Oh, yeah.
And then, here's your main development region coming off of Africa here. Pretty standard, kind of average for those temperature anomalies. And then as you're talking about the family zone up to the northeast, look at that.
Yeah.
Look how cool that is.
They don't really get too much.
So,
I mean, that was why Sandy was kind of a big shocker. Because, I mean, I think the last time they had a crazy hurricane, it was in the 80s, 70s, something like that.
So that would indicate likely no Sandy this year.
Yes.
But you can see there, we don't have just extreme warmth across the Atlantic in that main development region that we would typically see. But that El Nino is playing a part in creating that wind shear that comes across the Atlantic. And so for all the other crazy patterns that it will cause, like you were talking about last year, all those storms coming off of Africa and developing out there, likely less development from those waves, I guess, is the general theme that comes to.
Well, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sure people are looking at the Pacific and being like, oh, there's just a smidge bit of land from Mexico.
Yeah.
What's the deal with any of these hurricanes ever coming into our neck of the woods?
It doesn't happen often.
Which is interesting.
It is. You'd think it would, because we see plenty of them sort of meandering around out there.
Yes, especially last season. There were quite a few.
There were quite a few. I think one of the things that has to do with is just the general pattern overall in that zone tends to push things west, because the trade winds are a little bit more east to west there, where more west to east to the south. But it does happen every now and then. I think more likely what happens is maybe a storm moves inland and it sort of dissipates, and then you get the remnant piece of energy that crosses over, that sometimes can reform if it's strong enough. That's also such a mountainous region. Even though it is a thin strip, it's tough to get things to cross over, at that point. But certainly it's not totally out of the question. And I guess probably not, look at it. Water that warm, you may see some big storms in the Pacific this year. So
Mother
we'll see
Nature.
if any can hold on. So, this is what we're starting with, Arthur, and then you go down the line through Bertha and Cristobal and Dolly, and all have been, I think decent storms in the past. I remember some Cristobals and some Dollys at times, but nothing to warrant retiring their name, obviously.
But did the Dolly stuff, was there social media at that point in time?
I
feel like if that happened...
I know you're big on this.
I feel like we're going to see lots of Dolly stuff all over. I don't know how she's going to feel about that, but.
Natalie is just begging for the Dolly storm to come around so she can start making posts with Dolly Parton's face
really
on
don't,
it
but
going across the Atlantic.
I think it was episode 7 or 8 of Neighborly Natalie where somebody asked me a question, and I kind of went ahead to beat the social media game and be like, here, I'm beating you folks to the punch.
That's
but
right.
Hopefully we don't see that, though.
And if we do, hopefully it's just way out there so we can all have some fun with that. I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility, certainly. And then you continue on, Leah, Marco, Nana, and obviously some of these names are fairly new because we've seen some names retired over the past 5 to 6 years. It's a 6-year cycle, but if names get retired, of course, when that season comes back around, you're going to get some new names. And so some of these are fairly new because, let's say, what are we in, 2026? So 2020 was a very active season. If you think back to that, we had Ida the next year, but the year before Ida, I believe it was 2020 that we ran all the way into the Greek alphabet. And I should know this, but that was an extremely active season where we had a lot of potent storms as well. And so that's why we have some of these new ones, like that would have been the Laura year, if I'm not mistaken, out in Lake Charles, and maybe the D word is escaping me at this point, but 2020 was a big year, so that's why a lot of these names, I think, are a little bit unfamiliar compared to what we've seen maybe at other times during the seasons. So that's what we're looking at as we head forward. We'll come back here in just a little bit and talk more about some preparations that you can make as we get ready to kick off the hurricane season. And of course, we just aired our hurricane special, which I thought turned out very well.
It was awesome. If you missed out on it, head on over to WGNO.com and also take a look at it for over on the WGNO Plus app. Yeah,
you can find it there. And I think it turned out very well. A lot of great information in there as well. So come back in just a couple of minutes and wrap things up for you in our next segment. All right, back for Tracking the Tropics. Hank Allen and Natalie Parsons here with you. I did just run a double check to make sure I'm not going completely crazy. Laura was 2020. Delta was the other one that went out to the western part of the state. And of course, that was that insane year that we just went well into the Greek alphabet, and this is like
crazy.
This is out of control. We can't do this every year. Luckily, we haven't. So anyway, but just to refresh you on a couple of things here as we get ready for the season.
Yeah,
you want to run down some info for us?
It's important to know the difference between watches and warnings in terms of tropical storms and hurricanes and whatnot. So if we get a watch, that means that the conditions are possible. They're usually issued up to 48 hours in advance of tropical storm force winds. And then in terms of a warning, that basically means that conditions are expected and issued up to 36 hours in advance of a tropical storm force winds and whatnot. So basically a watch is possible. Maybe you have the ingredients, but whether or not you go making the cake is up for debate. But a warning is, okay, we got the ingredients, we're going to throw it into the oven, but whether we get something out of it, we'll see. So
yeah, and the Hurricane Center this year, I believe they're putting those on the cones now, right? The cone graphics, I believe, have the watches and warnings on them, as opposed to there used to be 2 different things. They're always tweaking things a little bit. But the theme is, if we're telling you a storm is coming, that's when you need to watch out. A lot of times we'll show these, but as we always say, the conditions are what you want to focus on, as opposed to maybe a watch or a warning or that sort of thing. But just realize that when you start getting these products issued, as Natalie said, I mean, you're within 2 days there. They don't issue a watch, 5 days out because they want to be a little bit more confident. So you're talking about up to 48 hours there. And then the peak of the season, we still got a long way to go, obviously.
You could see here that from June to August, kind of on the quote-unquote quieter side, but it still is possible. And then once we get past August 1st, it's going to be on the up and up. Getting into September, that's where you really see things, brewing very much. And then once we get into October, things will start to simmer down, and then the season ends in November. But believe it or not, we do have the chance to possibly see things from November to December, even though it's technically out of season. And that's kind of the same deal for May to June. It all depends on whether or not the situation is right. But, being that things are on the quieter side, and I say that in quotes because we are still in hurricane season, if you have not fully made preparations, now is the time to get things going.
What always interested me about this graphic is, I mean, obviously the clear peak around September 10th there of storms and hurricanes and named storms, that sort of thing. But you look at the legend there of the major hurricanes, that has a little bit more. I mean, obviously we don't get a ton of them. And there is a slight peak around the same time, but you notice that has a little bit more, I guess, longevity or breadth, if you will, in terms of major hurricane potential. So those things can kind of, pop up on you any time. And as you said, all the storms can. But, there's only so many major hurricanes to go around out there, so the peak isn't as well defined as the just general named storm scenario. But you can get them, they start popping up, and as we talked about that 2020 season, we had a couple of those rolling into early November even. If you might remember, it's down around Belize and Costa Rica, you had a couple rolling into there. So that major hurricane potential is pretty much always out there. And so as we move past Hurricane Prep Week into the start of the season here,
worth a reminding.
You just got to start thinking about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get things together like food and water, non-perishable items, keep gas tanks full, of course, have a radio. I know people are like, I don't need a radio, but listen, if your power goes out, you're going to need a weather radio so you could stay in the know for everything. Also, your cell phones and any electronic items, you need to have a power source for them. So make sure you have that external option for them. Also medicine, prescriptions, and here's one that we also forget about, being that we're in the electrical age and stuff. Make sure you have some cash on hand, because let's say we lose power. You can't go to an ATM, it's not gonna work. Your money, forget about it. So you could definitely wanna have cash on hand for sure.
Especially when so many places won't even take cash now.
Yes,
like you go to the Pelicans game or something, it's just all card and all that.
But it's like another language.
Right, doesn't work during storms, especially if you have to evacuate and that sort of thing. So put a couple of Hondo maybe away in a drawer somewhere and have those ready to go. Look, I still, even though we're in 2026, I'm still big on weather radios. And I know it's not as much of a push as it was. Well, not as much of a push. You'd have weather radio giveaways all the time. If we're talking about like 1998. You'd go to the store and Midland or whatever company it was would be giving out the weather radios. It's not as top of mind anymore with the digital aspect and the phone and everything, but they're still great, not just for this, but for severe weather, event coming in overnight. Your phone goes off sometimes, it doesn't others, but if there's a warning in your area that weather radio is going off, it's got a very loud alert. As you mentioned, they're battery operated. Yeah. I think they do still sell the crank ones.
The crank ones.
If you want to go that route. And I just think it's a great way to keep your resources handy as severe weather comes in.
Also flashlights. If you have candles and stuff, something that I learned maybe like a few days into moving here, because my apartment lost power, and my neighbor below me gave me some candles, and she gave me one of those big candles that you can actually put in a big candle holder, so you don't have to go worrying about them falling over, little safety thing there. But make sure you have lights.
Flashlights are great. Well, you lost power a couple of days after moving to New Orleans.
Oh, come on now. My move here was rather adventurous.
It was.
Totally destroying a flower bed at a hotel near Atlanta. Like, that's me with the U-Haul. Thank you very much.
I could have predicted the power outage, though, probably the way that it goes. Of course, you want to strengthen your home. If you've got stuff outside when we've got storms coming in, you want to secure those. Some people go the plywood route. If you are somebody that likes to board up their windows, I say get those cut now, measure those boards and get them cut now. Don't wait till a storm's 3 days out, because then you're just fighting everybody else to get those supplies. So go ahead and do that now. Same with trimming the trees. Get everything trimmed away from the house. Winds start to pick up. You don't want branches rubbing up against the siding and all that kind of thing.
Or another thing, if you have a tree that's old and kind of wobbles or whatever, maybe it's time to go getting rid of it.
Great point. Great point there. And we'll wrap it up with this here, because the biggest thing to me, flood insurance around here, and even home insurance if you don't have it, but certainly flood insurance, everybody should have it. And it takes about 30 days to kick in. So, you want to get those policies set now so you're ready to go by the peak of the season.
Because I can't imagine having like devastation, damage and whatnot, and then, not having any insurance and you have to go paying for that.
Right, and it happens all the time, and I know it's expensive and it's tough, and everything in the world is super expensive.
But it pays for itself, God forbid.
The price of everything is out of control. I understand it, but like you said, it's so much better than having to come out of pocket for all this stuff.
Better to be safe than sorry,
or
more ways
relying
than one.
on FEMA, because they're a lot, they just seem a lot more stingy than they used to be. So that'll wrap it up here for our first episode of Tracking the Tropics. Thanks for sticking with us. Natalie, Parsons, Hank Allen will be with you through the summer to bring you all the latest each week.
Yes.
Thank you.
See you then.